How do you like to drink your coffee? Do you like a Tim's Double Double first thing in the morning to give you a jolt of caffeine? Or do you like to put on a pot of coffee at home and sip it slowly throughout your morning? Do you like to go to Starbucks and have a mocha frappuccino with 2 pumps of caramel? Or would you prefer to go to a small local coffee shop and have a nice cappuccino? My name is Edward Martin, and I love coffee. And honestly, all of those things sound absolutely lovely to me. However, my favorite way to drink coffee is black coffee. You might be saying, "Black, that's so bitter. How can you drink that?" Well, any coffee that's worth its weight, about $20 a pound, by the way, doesn't have to taste like that. There are a number of factors that can lead to the different flavors that you'll find in a cup of coffee. Anything from the level of roast to the altitude at which the beans were harvested. Those particulars are beyond the scope of my presentation today, but you can find it all very well documented online or in books. However, what I do want to show you today is how I make the coffee. I like to make a pour over. First, what's all this stuff in front of me? This is my grinder. It's the Fellow Ode. It's a pricey one, but you can find alternatives that are around $100 that get about the same results. You can even find a $50 manual grinder if you're not afraid of putting in a little bit of elbow grease. These are burr grinders. Burr grinders are known for giving much more consistent grinds. That's in comparison to blade grinders, which are the ones that you're going to usually find at places like Walmart or Canadian Tire. Those tend to give a very uneven grind, and that's not what we want. The second piece of equipment I have here, which you might have heard boiling away, is a gooseneck kettle. Now, this isn't entirely necessary, but it does make the pour over process a little bit easier. Any old kettle will do, though. Don't worry about it. Third, this is the Hario V60 carafe and the cone that goes with it. I really like this, but anything of the sort will do. I've got another single serve version over here, and something like a Chemex is widely regarded as being able to produce some of the best coffees available. I also have a scale. A scale is a really essential part of this. You might not have thought of that, but it absolutely is necessary to really dial in your brew. You don't need an expensive one. Anything that can measure to the nearest gram will be fine. You can find them at the dollar store. And last, you need a good coffee. This is from Say in New York. I bought this box today. I've actually never had this kind before, but it smells really good, and I'm excited to brew it here with you today. So, let's actually get to the brewing process. The first thing that you want to note is that you want about a 1:16 ratio of coffee to water. I want to make about a 400 milliliter coffee, and what that means is that I'm going to need about 25 grams of beans. Don't use a scoop or a cup or anything like that to measure your beans. That's going to lead to inconsistent measurements. Using a scale is really the only way to make sure that you are getting the same recipe every single time. That's a little bit too much. I'm going to put some back in here. There we go. 25 exactly. Next, I'm going to grind it. I'm going to put that in here. It's a little bit weird to do this backwards, so bear with me as I struggle through this. However, the consistency of grind that you're looking for is that of about kosher salt. I'll show you when it's done here. Sorry for the noise this is about to make. Wait for it to be done. And I just noticed that my microphone didn't pick up any of that sound at all. And that goes to show you what the investment gave me here, which is a pretty quiet grinder for the cost. Now, let's see if I can show you this grind. I don't think it'll show up on the camera. It's a little dark. I apologize for that. However, it's a little bit finer than the kosher salt I mentioned a second ago. Now, I've got my kettle boiled, I've got my carafe ready, and I've got my filter in the cone. I'm going to wet the filter. This serves two purposes. The first one is to keep the filter in place during the brewing process. The second is to actually rinse out all of those papery tastes that, well, paper has. We're not going to keep this water, we're going to dispose of it. As you can see, I'm not in a kitchen, but I've got a bowl down here that I can actually throw this water into. I'm also going to pour a bit of water into my mug. What this is going to do is preheat the mug so that once I actually get the coffee in there, I'm spilling water absolutely everywhere, but that's going to preheat the mug so that when you pour the coffee in, it doesn't go cold too fast. The mug isn't going to absorb all of that heat right away and leave you with a lukewarm coffee in just 4 or 5 minutes. Well, it looks like we're ready to brew. I'm going to pour the coffee in here. I've measured on the scale again to make sure that I actually got all of the grinds out of the grinder, and it's reading 0.1 or 0.2 below what I actually put into the grinder, and that's okay. We're going to zero the scale again, and we're going to pour in just a little bit of water for something called the bloom. The bloom is a process that opens up the grinds and releases some of the gases that are in there and really readies the coffee to be brewed. We don't have to dispose of this water, but I'm putting in about twice the weight of the grinds that I initially put into the cone. We're going to wait for about 30 to 45 seconds, and then we're going to continue. Now, it's debated as to whether or not this actually does anything, so if you want to skip this, go ahead, but I like to do it. I think it's a good thing to do. Okay, and now it's time to pour. I can't really see inside of this because I'm sitting down, but I'm going to try my best. You want to pour in fairly wide circles. You'll note that I have the kettle quite close to this here. That's because I don't want the water falling from too high of a height. If you do that, what's going to happen is it's going to disturb the grounds so much that the water just ends up falling right through your filter. That doesn't lead to a very good grind. Doesn't lead to a very good brew. However, you don't want to do this super gently either. If you do it too gently, you're going to end up with channeling, which means that the water is going to try and push itself through the coffee bed with the path of least resistance. You're going to get a little tunnel, and that means that all the coffee in that tunnel is going to get over-extracted, and then all of the rest of the coffee will be under-extracted. And again, your coffee is not going to turn out so well. So, a couple centimeters above the water is where you want to be pouring, in these wide circles. I've got about 400 grams of water in there now, which is equal to 400 milliliters. 1 gram is 1 milliliter. And I'm going to swirl. What this swirl does is it takes that coffee bed and it levels it out so that the remaining water goes through as evenly as possible. This can take a while sometimes, but the whole process usually only takes about 3 minutes. We're waiting for it to pour down there now. Not a whole lot to do in this phase. The water's almost all the way through. I'm going to throw out the water I put in here for my preheating. The mug is nice and warm. Coffee is not going to go cold anytime soon. It's still dripping here. You can leave it for a while to get every single bit of coffee out of this, and with coffee as expensive as this, you might want to. However, I think I'm going to call it there. Throw that straight into the garbage. Can't really use them for anything. You can actually use coffee grinds as fertilizer, by the way, or to help plants in some way, shape, or form. I'm not exactly sure how, but that is beyond the levels of my knowledge right now. You can keep them. I'll let you folks look that up. And now we're ready to drink. If you measure the weight of your coffee, you'll see that it's a little bit lower than the water you put in. That's because the coffee grinds will absorb about a sixth of the water that you put in, but that's okay. Don't worry about it. And now for the best part. Let's see if it's any good. Okay, I've never had this coffee before. That is delicious. That is absolutely delicious. It is currently 8:50 p.m. I should not be drinking coffee right now. I will be up all night. But it's worth it because this is some of the best coffee I've ever had. And maybe you can have some of the best coffee you've ever had with a little bit of time and patience, a little bit of a financial investment, and a nice, freshly roasted craft coffee. Happy brewing.